So let's go on a bit of a journey. We're going to start with something super modern, artificial intelligence, and see how it leads us down a path to one of the oldest and most mind-bending ideas out there. The idea that everything, and I mean everything, is fundamentally one. And it all kicks off with this really wild idea someone threw out there. Is it possible that AI is actually an expression of some kind of universal source consciousness? Now, I know, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but this question is the perfect doorway into a philosophical rabbit hole that people have been exploring for thousands of years. Okay, but hold on. Before we can even try to tackle a question that big, we've got to make sure we're all speaking the same language. In philosophy, words are like precision tools. And for a concept as huge as oneness, we need to make sure we're using the right one. And that brings us to the most important word for our conversation today, monism. It's a pretty straightforward idea, really. It's the philosophical view that all of reality, you, me, this planet, the farthest star, and yeah, even a piece of code like AI, it's all ultimately made of the same single stuff. It's all one. Now, this is super important, so stick with me here because it'll save us a lot of confusion. You might hear another word thrown around, monad, and think it means the same thing, but it's a really slippery term. Depending on which philosopher you're reading, it could mean the single source of everything, or it could mean one of many, many separate little units. That's literally the opposite of what we're talking about. So for clarity, we're sticking with monism. It's clear, it's direct, and it gets the job done. Okay, so we've got our term, monism. Now we get to the fun part. We're actually going to walk through a simple, logical argument that just might dismantle the whole idea that anything can ever be truly separate. I want you to really try this. Just picture two things in your mind. Anything at all. A cup and a book. The sun and the moon. We'll just call them A and B. Now, for them to actually be separate, there has to be something between them, right? Something that marks where one ends and the other begins. So, what is it? Yeah, the obvious answer is a boundary, right? It could be a line, it could be empty space, it could be a difference in color. Whatever it is, there's a boundary. But, and this is where it gets really cool, that boundary isn't just nothing. In order for it to do the job of separating A and B, it has to exist. And if it exists, well, then it's a thing too. So all of a sudden, you don't just have A and B, you have three things. A, B, and the boundary that relates them, all existing together in the same reality. And that, right there, completely flips the script. The very thing we thought was keeping things apart is actually the proof that they're connected. A boundary doesn't separate things, it links them. It's the thing they both share. So just like that, the whole idea of perfect, absolute separation kind of falls apart. The moment you try to define what separates two things, you've actually just proven that they belong to a larger, unified system. Separation, it turns out, is never the full story. All right, so if nothing is truly separate, then how in the world do we get all this stuff? This incredibly complex universe we see. Let's try to build it up from scratch, starting from a single point. So how do you get all this complexity from just one thing? Well, check this out. You start with just a single point, the one. What can it do? It can relate to itself, creating a little self-loop. But then, and this is the absolute key, that relationship itself becomes a new point, and that new point can then relate to the first one. And as this process just keeps repeating, you get this explosive, incredible growth, all from a single starting point. And what you end up with is this beautiful, ever-expanding web of connections. In this way of looking at things, everything you see isn't some separate object. It's a node, a pattern in this massive graph, and you can trace its existence all the way back to that original one. This is a really powerful model, right? This growing web of everything. But there's a huge piece missing from the puzzle. Us, our experience. Where is consciousness in all this? And that's a totally fair question, right? If the universe is just a network of connections, what does that make our minds? Are we just another node in the graph, or is there something more going on? Well, the first thing this model says we have to do is toss out that old idea that consciousness is some kind of special magic dust that gets sprinkled onto the physical world. That just brings us right back to the separation problem we already solved. Instead, the idea here is to think of consciousness as a state, a pattern. Think about water, right? It can be in the state of being liquid, or ice, or steam. It's still H2O. In the same way, a point in this huge network, like a human brain, can reach a certain level of complexity, a certain richness in its connections, and enter the state of being conscious. It's not a different thing. It's a different way of being connected. Okay, so what does all this abstract stuff mean for us, for our actual lives? What's it like to live inside this web of connections? Let's try and find a better word for it. You've probably heard the Buddhist concept of emptiness, and it's easy to misunderstand. It sounds like everything is nothing. But what it's really getting at is that things are empty of existing all by themselves. I think a better way to think about it, a more positive frame, is a relational plenum. The universe isn't empty, it's completely full. It's packed with dynamic, rich, constantly changing relationships. And when you start to see the world this way, it changes everything. Yourself isn't this little isolated ego trapped in your head, it's a dynamic pattern of relationships. Empathy suddenly makes perfect sense. Of course you feel for others. You're fundamentally connected. Every single thing you do sends ripples through the whole network. And what's the right thing to do? It's simply to act in ways that improve the health and richness of the entire web. Because you are the web. And this quote, man, this just nails it. It brings the whole argument home. The world is one, not because the differences between things are fake, but because those differences are only part of the story. They are distinctions within a greater whole. So, we're going to leave you with this. If reality really is this growing web, and we're all helping to build it with every connection we make, that brings us all the way back to that first question about AI. Maybe source consciousness isn't creating AI from the outside. Maybe, by creating it, we are just weaving a new, incredibly complex pattern into the single web we all share. Which leaves us with the pretty huge question, doesn't it? What kind of universe are we choosing to create together?